So welcome to the Student Teacher. Today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing my old school head teacher, Mr. Booth. And today we're going to be looking at some of the wider topics of the challenges the education system is facing on a higher level from a executive head's point of view, which I think will be really interesting to explore, just as we explore the wider sense of our education system and how it's functioning and some of the good bits about it and maybe some of the bad bits about it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Booth. And would you just care to give us a bit of an overview of your career in education?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Tom. I'm Andy Booth. I'm Executive Principal over 2 academies in South East London, and started as an art teacher and then worked my way through the pastoral system, having then gone into a curriculum lead, changed schools, been involved in pretty much failing schools and making them into good or outstanding schools in that whole journey, including obviously assistant principal, etc., as you go through the various ranks. Yeah, really, I've loved every minute. It's a tough job, but I love it. So it's been good fun.
That's so good. And so obviously you have a very broad experience in the education system. And just at the moment of where our country is in 2020, what do you think are maybe 1 or 2 of the biggest challenges the education system is facing in regards to giving a quality education to all of our young people?
So I think obviously the gap that's discussed and talked about for disadvantaged students in particular, I think is one of the biggest things, and I think it's obviously always been there. It's great to see that it actually has been tackled, and obviously that's been exacerbated by COVID, and that's obviously put us, I was reading actually the other day, something it's set us back another 10 years possibly, and it was already looking like 50 years, so that's sort of 60 years really we're talking till things change. And that gap reduced to almost nothing. So I think that's just a huge thing. And then always for me, I just think it's so political, education. And I think you look at other countries where it's not so political, that it has the educationists are able to get on with their education and doing what they're professionals to do and what they're trained to do, rather than being swayed to and fro. Certainly in my 20 odd years plus in education, we've seen trends come and go, whether that's the way you learn, the old visual, audio, kinesthetic learner, that was something of the past, and then you've got trends that come in now. And some of them stick because some of them are really based in research, and that's, I think, one of the things that's happened recently is a lot more research-based, thoroughly grounded has helped practice and pedagogy, which has been a good thing. And then dare I say, obviously, and because of the politicised system of education, I think obviously financial control and what that looks like has constraints, and I think finances has had a big effect on schools, both negatively and more recently, positively with some things that have been done to obviously come against the COVID scenario that we're obviously been experiencing in 2020.
Yeah, wow, that's really big topics that you've covered there. I'd just like to kind of pick up on the political one that you said there. And I guess looking into it, I was surprised personally by some of the things that were included or weren't included in the curriculum or weren't prioritised in the curriculum. Just things like, I feel sometimes social and emotional development is sometimes put to the wayside for passing academic exams, or just in exams things like speech and communication has been taken off as the official part of the assessor for GCSE English, which I was really shocked at. And so do you think that the curriculum at the moment that we're given by the government is the best curriculum it could be to kind of enable students to develop?
So I think I've always been very much, whether it's my classroom practice as a trainee teacher and then teacher, qualified teacher, I've always been very much about the person and the student that I'm teaching, and seeing them as a whole person, and I'm not just there to, in my particular subject, drive that subject through, and to whatever ends the outcome is what I'm grounded in. And I know there are people who will disagree with that, but I'm, as you're suggesting, very much grounded in character education and making sure that you've got people that can, if you like, stand on their own 2 feet in 21st century. And to answer the question about curriculum and where we are now, I think, and this is where I think again the politicised system doesn't help. So on the one hand, we've got people saying we want a broad and balanced curriculum, but actually, because of the measures that Ofsted bring in, the first thing they measure is certain things being in the curriculum. So therefore, by default, they are restricting the curriculum, because if you don't have X, Y, and Z, by the very nature of that, then they're obviously controlling that, which is again another politicised system. I don't have a problem with standards. I think that's very important, but because it's so political, and although the Ofsted are not directly invested in the DFE and Ofsted are obviously two separate entities, but there is a real marrying of those two things. So I think as a leader in education, you've really got to sort of explore what's best for your students, and I really do believe in a broad curriculum and a balanced one. But I would say that actually we're still based with actually a quite restriction, because you're forced down a certain route. There are certain subjects that are almost not even mentioned, that actually for some students are a real catalyst for their involvement and feeling good about themselves and being able to to really excel, which obviously you want all your students. And I do believe if you can find the right button or the right subject, I think every student can excel at something, and that's not always, as you've mentioned, maths in an exam, recall in that way. It could be, as you said, I know many students that are very good orators, but are not very good at maybe putting their thoughts down on paper in a timed fashion. If you look at some of the fantastic authors that have been through, authors that have been through their experience, they're not constrained by time. They can just write when they want to and put down the pen, or they can pick it up, at 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And I think we've really constrained education by an exam system. And I think there are other ways, particularly in this day and age, where it opens up the opportunity for students to really embrace other ways of learning.
Yeah,
we've gone backwards, I think, at some points.
Yeah, there are so many different opportunities that often aren't afforded to the students in just the way the education system's done, I guess. And so, just bringing on to that, do you think that how much control do you think you have over what you get to teach? Now, I know I've seen in the news with COVID, like head teachers saying, we don't think these plans will work, and then there's still the plans are being put into place, even though people who are obviously experts in the education system. How much of a say do you have as a head teacher?
I'm very fortunate in the trust that I work with, and I think whilst there are obviously certain constraints, if you like, or guidance, there's still quite a lot of autonomy. However, I think the position of things like curriculum, as I've said, things like the amount, even down to the amount of time that you've got to cover those things. There's quite a lot of constraint. However, I think I've always tried to think about the students in the setting in which I found myself in, and try and teach to that area. So I think there are areas where we've got quite a lot of autonomy, but within a confined, really. And I think we've gone backwards in some ways in that area, because I think there is much more of a freedom that is there as a possibility of learning, but we're just not allowed to sort of go down those lines. On the one hand, they're saying, oh, it's not all about exams. You shouldn't be teaching to the exam. everyone knows that that is what you're actually, weighed on. And therefore it's very difficult, and as a leader, keeping that breadth at an earlier stage in their curriculum, a student's journey, it is really important. It's so easy to find yourself reverting back to kind of exams. They're going to need to know this, they're going to need to know that, and just reverting back to sort of type of again, weighing the pig, if you like, because that's what's going to happen. You almost sort of live and die in terms of your career on the results that you get.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy. So, moving on a bit, what changes do you think need to be made? Maybe one on a high level, and maybe one on a low level that can be enacted quite quickly, and then maybe an idea that could be enacted on a higher government level or kind of thing?
So I think I've sort of maybe hinted a little bit at it. I think, depoliticise would be a great thing. Very often I think people are making legislation. They're not teachers, they're not educationalists, they are politicians, and they will be swayed by what they think are the trends and what is necessary to win votes. And that's not the way to run an education system, in my opinion. So I think there are things that need to be obviously looked at in that area. So that's probably at the highest sort of level of legislation and making those calls. So that's one area. I think for sort of leaders and classroom teachers, I think it's really responding to the individuals. And I think when I think about the best teachers and those teachers that get the best outcomes, and it's a very fine balance, but whilst they're focusing on the students that are disadvantaged, and there is a focus on that, and quite rightly, for all the right reasons, and I would concur with them, the best teachers seem to be able to teach without that as a knowledge, because they individually know every student, and it's almost irrelevant that they are disadvantaged, because they're just picking up on what the student needs to know. And therefore I think that's I think where the strongest teachers with better outcomes, that are outstanding teachers and get great outcomes, and also the students really respond to, because they're almost not being treated as different. Which is true. I think we have to have an eye on it, but actually the craft in the classroom is to make sure, and actually in culture within a school, is because I think you can easily get to that, you're disadvantaged and you're not. Actually shouldn't be like that. What we're teaching is right for everyone and all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I really like that, because we learned just in Teach First recently about quality first teaching, and it says don't just pick out the SEND or the disadvantaged or the lower attaining students, but make sure that your quality of teaching covers all the students, because that's the best way to reach those students. It was really interesting just what they taught us about that. Okay, so just I have two more questions for you. This one's a bit similar, but if you could just enact two changes now. I know this is similar to your high and low one, but if two very real changes you could make, and you would say, I would do this and this, very concrete, what would they be? So I think the quality first teaching, as you said, is something, and I'm at a loss. I think if I knew that, it would be a golden bullet, and I don't think there is a silver bullet other than what we've just been talking about, because of it's always been my sort of mantra within leadership teams, is that very thing. If the secret, if you like, if there is one, to outcomes of all students has to be in the classroom. It has to be about that quality in the classroom, and if we can crack that and get the quality there in all subjects, and students should be entitled to that. It shouldn't matter whether they've got Mr. X or Mrs. Y. Getting that quality throughout, and that unfortunately is not just something
you can do. You know, it's
not
something that you've got to work on. But I think that's what I look for in the schools that I'm a leader of, is trying to get, and how do we make every single teacher the best teacher they can be to deliver the best, you know, education, quality first education.
So let's pick up on that quickly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So if you could enact one change to enable teachers to be better, it could be something like lightening workload, or providing them with more days to train themselves in actual current researched techniques, or just even like when I looked at quality first teaching, having an actual outline of what quality first teaching is, because I looked and there are about 1,000 different things talking about different versions of quality first teaching. So it wasn't a like concrete, this is what quality first teaching looks like. So if you could choose one specific thing in that goal of making teachers quality, what do you think you would do, or do you think needs to be done?
Yeah, I think workload, you know, workload is something that is tricky for staff, and tricky as a leader to manage. And I certainly think that, you know, reducing some of the teaching hours to enable their own research, their own reflection, and therefore training, whether that's going to see other teachers teach, you know, quality first teachers, and involved in coaching and seeing that coaching, because I think, you know, very often teachers don't get great feedback at their craft and actually practicing something and feeling confident. And again, this almost goes full circle to what we were saying, because of the fact that we're so geared up, and the system is so geared up for results, you feel as a teacher sometimes you can't afford to practice on your students, because if what happens if it goes wrong, you know, what happens if I make a mess? But I think, you know, the only thing we're telling students themselves is, you know, working a climate for mistakes to happen, that mistakes are fine, is something that teachers don't always find the time to. So if I could, I would look to reducing some of the teaching time, therefore having, you know, more time to do their job, but also, and part of that job is to train yourself, is to be better at what you do. And I think there are other professions like, you know, doctors and nurses and lawyers and solicitors that, you know, do have a training opportunity within their profession. And yes, we have CPD, and yes, we have those areas, but I think to have that culture within a school is a strong thing to do. So I think that's something that I would try and do, you know, that I think would have a big effect to again get that quality first teaching that we're talking about, and that you want to see in your schools.
I guess it could be just on the thing of doctors, they had it's like mandated, isn't it? They had to give in their like evidence of this is what I've done to improve myself. And I don't know if we have that in education.
Not in the same way. I mean, the thing that would maybe come as close to that would be performance management. But yet again, we seem to have taken something from the world of commerce, and I use the word dumped it into, you know, education. And whilst there are, I know, examples of very good practice, I still think it's something that it isn't out there, you know, within the profession, that they see that as really important. It's generally a hoop to go through to get your increment, and the next promotion, or actually not always promotion, just a pay scale jump. And whilst that's brought some professionalism within the profession, I don't think it's always added value to the actual teaching in the classroom.
So maybe that's another thing that could be looked at. Okay, so my final question for you is, obviously I'm doing this as a trainee teacher, and this is just good for me. So what piece of advice would you give, and I know you probably do give your trainee teachers when they come into your school, but one piece of advice that you'd give to a trainee?
So I thought about this, and I think, there's two things. So number one, I think relationships are so important. So establishing great relationships within the classroom, and it actually links to the second one, which is don't try and be another teacher. You know, I know I've certainly, you know, I had a very strong member of a strong head of department, my first department, and she was quite a formidable teacher, and I tried to be her, and I found out very quickly, to my cost, and sadly to some of my students probably, that I couldn't be her, and I wasn't her, and actually needed to feel. So that my second part is feeling comfortable in your own teacher persona. And we talk a lot about a teacher persona, and I think it takes time, clearly, but actually just feeling comfortable as to how you teach, your style of teaching, and with that, I think that does then help to build those relationships, which I think is so important, because I think there will be those you naturally are drawn towards, but there is an advocacy, I think, within teaching, within the classroom, that whilst you're in that moment of whether it's 50 minutes, 100 minutes, that is where the advocacy is. You are championing them, and you're championing each one of them, which is why it's such a hard job, but such a rewarding job, because you are being the advocate within each and every student. And so I think relationships and just feeling comfortable in your own skin, in your own teaching persona, and therefore be willing to take risks, as hard as that is. And it's a very fine balance, but yeah, that's the two things I'd give as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah. And I've thought a lot about my own teacher persona and how I'm going to be. So I hope I don't try and be someone else.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you so much for your time. I know it's in your summer holidays and whatnot, so appreciate that. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, please give a like and subscribe. I appreciate that, and I will see you in the next video.